Tony, you're on the call. What I want to do is get you in into legal trouble. Is that okay?
That's okay. I've only got a shirt on my back and this T-shirt for Tanushka, so they
Right.
can sue me with all my
Well,
without
the
any
the the,
problem.
the reason why I wanted you to come on, I've asked a couple of other people to come on, but they've not been particularly willing to do this because
Sure.
this man on the left, Gary Lubner, who we featured in an interview with Asa Winstanley last year. I think he donated over 5 million to the Labour Party, and his family had links with in apartheid South Africa. They did quite well at the time of apartheid South Africa. Trying to change, be careful with my words. And he's also regarded as a bit of an Israel lobbyist. Anyway, people have been featuring this guy and how he donated money to Labour, but Novara Media put out an apology, long apology, really grovelling apology to him, to Gary Lubner. And they've also paid damages to the Community Security Trust, which maybe I'll ask you about as well. What do you make of the Gary Lubner uh, donations to Labour, what he represents, and also why Novara Media have capitulated like this?
Well, I mean, Crispin, I mean, you know that I am loath to criticise my fellow man. I mean, I would run a million miles before saying anything bad about anyone, but the
Yeah, that's true.
behaviour of Novara Media reminds me of the kind of backbone of a constipated worm. I mean, it's utterly disgraceful. They show they've got absolutely no balls. They've never stood up for anything when it was unpopular. You remember the anti-Semitism smear nonsense. I mean,
Mm.
Novara Media ran with it. I mean, they said Jackie Walker deserved what she got, Ken Livingstone should be expelled, etc. So it doesn't really surprise me. And this apology is really disgraceful. To apologize, for instance, for saying that Jack Lubner, no, not Jack, well, in fact, Gary and Jack Lubner are not lobbyists for Israel or supporter of the apartheid state. It's just absolute nonsense. Lubner is a patron of the United Israel Jewish Appeal, which is the British wing of Karanya Hayesod, which is the fundraising arm of the Jewish state, the Israeli state. It's one of three pillars of that state. It's entrenched in law. Gary Lubner was the accountant for the family firm in South Africa, the PG Group, it was called. He was their accountant. And this firm, which dealt with glass, was intricately involved in sanctions busting, and not only sanctions busting, but he actually joined something called the South Africa Foundation, which lobbied abroad against sanctions on South Africa. He was a white businessman, and like most white businessmen, they went along with apartheid. But they also realized in the middle of the 1980s that apartheid was coming to an end. And so basically, they bought themselves an alibi. And that was true throughout white South Africa. The business community, which until then had been staunch backers of the National Party, and the PG Group gave money to the National Party, and to pretend that giving money to the bulwark, the creators of apartheid, somehow made you an opponent of apartheid, is absolute nonsense. The Jewish community, of which you're an integral part, supported apartheid until the mid 1980s. It did a deal with the Nats. Namely, if the Nats dropped their anti Semitism, they would drop their opposition to apartheid. They were fully signed up to this. There were a number of big businessmen who took exactly the same attitude, who were Jewish. And the Lubners were, and they were, say, a family firm. Their old uncle, Bertie, praised P.W. Botha, the last but one Afrikaner prime minister. And Botha was a member of a pro-Nazi group during the war. And if people want to read more about it, then there's Asa Winstanley's excellent article on the Lubners on electronic intifada.
And he hasn't withdrawn that. He hasn't taken it down. He's actually, I think, tweeted it in the last week to sort of show that he's not retracting it.
Well, that's right. And Gary Lubner, he actually joined as a student the South African police force. It was a South African police force which was the main enforcer of the apartheid repression. You won't remember, but in 1961, the Sharpeville massacre was carried out by the South African police force. They were the ones who tortured and imprisoned activists. And if you ask my friend Ronnie Casriels, who was the Jewish commander of Umkhonto we Sizwe, the ANC's military force, whether he thinks that Gary Lubner was an anti-apartheid activist, he would probably die laughing. I mean, it's utter absurdity. These people were capitalists, and capitalists know when the chips are down, they have to join the winning side, and that's what it is. Now, Novara Media could have fought this. They could have said, of course you supported apartheid. Of course you were an intricate part of that whole machinery. Of course you support Israel. And today, what does the son, Jack, say? Because he's a member of the Jewish labor movement. He's chair of Young Labour. He's integrally involved in the campaign against BDS. He's a signed-up Zionist, and to me, that means you're a signed-up supporter of apartheid. So the Liberals have switched from South African apartheid to the much more dangerous and genocidal Zionist apartheid. I mean, that's the only journey they've travelled. And Gary Lubner told the Financial Times about Corbyn and the left. Starmer got rid of them, to his credit. It was a real cancer in the party. In other words, they signed up lock, stock and barrel to the fake anti-Semitism narrative that was used so successfully against Corbyn and the left in the Labour Party.
How can Novara Media do features on anything if they buckle under on that? I mean, it just seems like I mean, there's no. I mean, if Asa Winstanley and others are sticking to what they've written, I don't really understand it. I mean, it almost needs an explanation, doesn't it, from them? What have they actually?
Well, I suspect they won't say anything because now they've legally signed on the dotted line. But I mean, the reality is that Novara Media will shift with the tide. If opinion in the bourgeois press is anti-Starmer, if the winds, if you like, of the tide of opinion is against the left, they will sail with it. They won't stand up and fight. And as I say, they have no moral or political backbone. They won't swim against the tide. And that's really what this is, because they could have fought it. They could have got lawyers and solicitors who would say, hey, but this is not true. You were part of that machine. You did give money to the nationalists, the main apartheid party in South Africa. I mean, yes, F.W. Clerk, the last white prime minister, has spoken up in their defense. But Clerk was elected as the leader of the nationalists precisely because he was the most ardent supporter of apartheid. He was known as a hardline exponent. And that was what enabled him to carry out the reforms, because he knew that the chips were down, if you like, that apartheid no longer had a chance in the world because of world opinion and because people were disinvesting.
Just about the CST, the people that Novara Media have donated to, can you tell us a bit about what that is?
Yes, the Community Security Trust, which was set up around, again, the mid-1980s, is supposedly devoted to protecting Jews in this country, and it collates statistics on this. But as Tony Lerman, who was the founder of the Institute of Jewish Policy Research before he was removed because he was calling out and questioning the whole use of anti-Semitism against Palestinian supporters, said he was in charge of compiling a world anti-Semitism report, an independent report on the actual incidents of anti-Semitism worldwide. And he was called in, he was contacted by the local Mossad representative at the British Israel's British Embassy and told that Mossad was taking over the project. Now, why would Mossad, which is the equivalent of the MI6 in this country, why would MI6 take over the monitoring of race statistics of racism? It wouldn't make any sense unless it was part of an overall propaganda drive of Israel. The CST is a Mossad project. There's absolutely no doubt about it. And that's why Britain gives them millions and millions of pounds to Home Office each year. I think it's 15 million they get in the grant, whereas Muslim organizations have got 1 million for fighting Islamophobia. And of course, anti-Semitism, therefore, increases every year because it has to increase every year. They have to frighten people and say, Palestine solidarity means increase in anti-Semitism. But if you look at and delve into the statistics like I have, then it's a very different picture. The one concrete fact is what they call incidents of severe injury to Jews. There were none last year. Not one Jew was attacked in a way that physically was. Compare that to Muslims. You know, you have mosques, people attacking, trying to spurn, etc., set on fire, mobs surrounding them as we had in the last riot. You don't get that with synagogues today. The attention of the far right, which is pro-Israel anyway, is firmly on Muslim and black people in this country. So the CST is basically an Israeli cutout.
I mean, they could have said no. They could have said no. We won't give money to that unless they didn't know. If Novara Media didn't know what CST was or had no understanding of it, that might be something. But surely if they're journalists, they'd know what it represents.
They know how
Would
to
have
do
said,
it.
we're not going to give money to that organization.
Yeah, it's a pro-Zionist organization. When I applied for, when I put in a subject access request to the CST, I got a file that big, so big, you know, it contained things I couldn't even remember. I could base my autobiography on the CST. They've compiled so much information about me. Then why would they compile information on me? I've been fighting fascism all my life. If they're anti-fascist, as they claim, why would you monitor anti-fascists? Doesn't make sense, does it?
No.
Yeah, just don't contribute to Novara Media if they put out the begging bowl. There are plenty more worthy causes.
Yeah, donate to something else because that you're wasting your money really there.